After watching tens of films where Jesus was shown as white, would you ever dare to believe that Jesus was black? Well, there will be hundreds of films on Jesus, and probably hundreds of more where Jesus was shown in one or two scenes, but always as a white man with blonde hair and blue eyes. Even if you did not watch the film for religious insights, movies intentionally include unnecessary scenes with only one goal: to reinforce the idea that Jesus was white. What really happens after this is that despite knowing all literature and historical records pointing toward Jesus' black roots, you find it hard to trust what's logical because you have watched movies, paintings, and even read literature where Jesus was told as white. This very idea has gone very deep in your mind. Therefore, whenever you think or hear about Jesus, a handsome white man with European features comes to your mind. That's precisely what the European churches have always wanted. But was Jesus black? Welcome to a new episode of Black Afric Diary, a channel where we talk about Black African history, culture, arts, and civilization. It's a place where you will see the real picture of Black Africa, its stories, and the events defining it. In this episode, we will tell you about Jesus' real ethnicity, which is quite the opposite of a white European man everyone thinks about. Let's get started. To understand Jesus' true ethnicity, it's essential to consider the historical and geographical context of Jesus' life. Born in Bethlehem, in what is now modern-day Israel, around 4 to 6 BC, Jesus was part of the Middle Eastern Semitic population. The people of that region had darker skin, dark hair, and physical features typical of Middle Eastern populations, not the European features commonly depicted in Western art and media. Yet, despite this reality, Jesus has been continuously represented as a white man in art, literature, and films for centuries. However, Hollywood has played a powerful role in shaping public perceptions of Jesus. Starting with early films like From the Manger to the Cross, made in 1912, the film industry almost exclusively cast white actors in the role of Jesus. In this early film, R. Henderson Bland, a white actor, portrayed Jesus, reflecting not historical accuracy, but the racial biases of the time. That's because, during the early 20th century, Hollywood was entrenched in racial segregation, operating under the influence of white supremacy. Therefore, it was almost impossible to show Jesus as black, the color of people white supremacists considered inferior. If they prayed to black Jesus, it meant black people were not inferior but superior, and white supremacists never wanted that to happen. Black actors were largely barred from mainstream roles, and when black characters were included, they were often portrayed by white actors in blackface. By casting white actors as biblical figures, Hollywood not only excluded black talent, but also reinforced the idea that religious icons, especially Jesus, should look white. Even as Hollywood slowly began to open up to black actors in the mid-20th century, the portrayal of Jesus as white persisted. For instance, the 1952 film, The Life of Christ, once again cast a white actor in the role of Jesus, despite the growing presence of black actors in the industry. By then, the choice to cast a white actor was not due to a lack of black talent, but was a conscious decision rooted in maintaining a specific, racially biased narrative. But it goes beyond the film industry. Depicting Jesus as white can be traced back to the colonial era, when European powers used religion as a tool to justify the conquest of non-European territories. Missionaries spread Christianity alongside images of a white Jesus, promoting the idea that divinity and moral superiority were synonymous with whiteness. This served to reinforce colonial ideologies that justified the oppression of non-white populations. By depicting Jesus as white, European colonizers effectively erased the Middle Eastern roots of Christianity, replacing it with a Eurocentric narrative that aligned with their worldview. This deliberate whitewashing was a strategic move to align holiness with whiteness, justifying the subjugation of people of color under the cover of religious authority. Furthermore, the imagery of a white Jesus also owes much to Renaissance artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, who painted Jesus as a fair-skinned European man. These depictions were not intended to be historically accurate, but were influenced by the artists' own backgrounds and the cultural norms of their time. Over centuries, these images became the default representation of Jesus in Western culture, further entrenching the belief that Jesus was white. Yet, historical texts and scholarly interpretations suggest that Jesus would have had the physical characteristics typical of the Middle Eastern population of his era: darker skin, dark hair, and features that would be more consistent with the people of his time and place. However, these depictions never gained the same prominence in Western culture because they did not fit the narrative European colonizers wanted to promote. Even the Bible itself challenges the whitewashed portrayals of Jesus. In the Book of Revelation, Jesus is described as having hair like wool and feet like burnished bronze, descriptions that align more with a person of color than the fair-skinned, blue-eyed figure so often seen in Western art. However, these details have been largely ignored in favor of a more Eurocentric image of Christ. What's particularly telling is that Hollywood has been aware of these historical inaccuracies for decades, yet continues to depict Jesus as white. Films like The Passion of the Christ featured Jim Caviezel, a white actor, in the role of Jesus, further perpetuating this myth. Despite clear evidence from scholars and historians suggesting that Jesus was likely darker-skinned, Hollywood remains reluctant to shift away from this entrenched portrayal. The refusal to portray Jesus more accurately speaks to a deeper issue within Hollywood and Western media: an unwillingness to challenge long-standing cultural narratives that align with white supremacy. By keeping Jesus white, Hollywood sustains a visual narrative that reinforces racial hierarchies established centuries ago. However, Clementine Hunter, a self-taught African-American artist, challenged these entrenched stereotypes through her paintings. By depicting a Black Jesus, Hunter sought to reclaim the narrative and present a more historically accurate portrayal. Her work gained recognition and was even featured in some Bibles, standing as a bold challenger of the traditional whitewashed depictions. Through her art, Hunter reminded people that Jesus was not a white European, but a Middle Eastern figure, likely with darker skin. Her courageous stand was a powerful statement against the centuries-long erasure of Jesus's true heritage. Yet Hollywood continues undisturbed, and people keep on accepting white Jesus passively, never questioning the conflict that exists between the appearance and geographical facts. The pattern of casting white actors as Jesus continued well into the 21st century. In the 2003 film, The Gospel of John, Henry Ian Cusick played Jesus with an all-white supporting cast. Similarly, The Nativity Story featured white actors as Mary and Joseph, ignoring the fact that these historical figures were Middle Eastern. Hollywood's rejection of diversifying its casting choices reflects an ongoing attachment to outdated portrayals that align with Eurocentric ideals. One of the most glaring examples is Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, released in 2004. Despite its attempt at historical authenticity through period costumes and settings, the film chose Jim Caviezel, a white actor, to play Jesus. The upcoming sequel, The Passion of the Christ Resurrection, will continue this trend with Caviezel reprising his role. Hollywood's insistence on casting white actors for these roles highlights a persistent denial to acknowledge the historical reality of Jesus' origins. Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black Africa. Let's continue now. Questions arise on why Hollywood keeps on portraying Jesus as white, despite being open to criticism, liberal, and sensitive to inclusivity. Well, this shows a deeper reluctance to challenge established cultural narratives. It's not that the industry is unaware of historical facts. Rather, there is a vested interest in maintaining a narrative that aligns with Western ideals. The image of a white Jesus has become so ingrained in Western culture that it is difficult for many to accept a different representation. This reluctance to shift the narrative goes beyond artistic freedom. It's about preserving a visual legacy that has supported white supremacy for centuries. By continuously presenting Jesus as white, Hollywood perpetuates a cultural myth that reinforces the notion that holiness, moral authority, and divinity are inherently tied to whiteness. This narrative not only distorts historical facts, but also upholds racial hierarchies that have long influenced Western society. But why does it matter so much? What really is connected with Jesus' ethnicity? Well, it impacts everything for Black people. By portraying Jesus in their own likeness, Europeans effectively made Jesus their own God, reinforcing a sense of racial superiority. The image of a white Jesus was used as a tool to legitimize their colonial rule, sending a clear message that those who looked like them were closer to God. This Eurocentric image became deeply embedded in the cultures of colonized nations, where it served as a powerful psychological tool. By associating divinity with whiteness, colonizers were able to elevate themselves above the people they subjugated. It sent a message that holiness, purity, and even God's favor were aligned with white skin, leaving non-white populations feeling distanced from the divine. For Black people, whether those enslaved in the Americas or those colonized in Africa, the introduction of a white Jesus came with profound psychological consequences. Imagine being a Black person, oppressed by white colonizers or enslavers, and then being told to pray to a God who looks exactly like your oppressor. This creates a deep sense of conflict. How can you truly connect with a divine figure who mirrors those who dehumanize you? This depiction of Jesus as white creates an emotional and spiritual barrier for Black worshippers. It sends an implicit message that closeness to God is tied to whiteness. As a result, Black individuals who pray to this image may internalize feelings of inferiority, believing they are somehow less in the eyes of God. If the divine is depicted as white, it becomes difficult for Black people to see themselves as equally worthy or embraced by their faith. Therefore, representation matters profoundly, especially when it comes to figures that hold deep spiritual significance. Seeing oneself reflected in the image of divinity can be a powerful affirmation of one's self-worth. However, when Jesus is consistently depicted as a white man, it perpetuates the notion that holiness and righteousness are inherently tied to whiteness. This can erode the self-esteem of Black worshippers, making them feel that they are inherently further from God. Imagine the transformative impact of Jesus being commonly depicted as a Black man. It would not only challenge the long-held association of divinity with whiteness, but also provide Black worshippers with a sense of belonging in their faith. Knowing that Jesus looked more like them, sharing their skin color, their facial features, and possibly even their struggles, could promote a deeper spiritual connection. It would affirm that they, too, are made in the image of God, and that they are fully embraced by their faith. Therefore, correcting the portrayal of Jesus is not just about historical accuracy. It's about healing the spiritual wounds inflicted on non-white populations for centuries. While there have been films that depict Jesus as Black, they rarely receive the same visibility as their white-centered counterparts. A quick search for films about Jesus will likely bring up big Hollywood hits like The Passion of the Christ, where Jesus is portrayed by a white actor. These mainstream films dominate the conversation, overshadowing movies that attempt a more historically accurate portrayal. A more recent and daring example is The Book of Clarence, released in 2023. This film breaks away from tradition by portraying Jesus as Black and depicting the people of Bethlehem more accurately. Yet, despite its groundbreaking approach, The Book of Clarence hasn't received the mainstream promotion or recognition that white-centered films typically enjoy. This disparity in attention is not about the quality of these films, but reflects Hollywood's hesitation to embrace narratives that challenge the status quo. The TV series Black Jesus, which aired from 2014 to 2019, offered a bold and unconventional portrayal. In this show, Jesus is reimagined as a Black man living in an inner-city neighborhood, socializing with everyday people, and engaging in activities that are far from the typical saintly image. Despite its comedic approach, the series delivered a deeper message. Jesus' compassion and teachings are universal, transcending race, class, and social status. However, the show faced mixed reactions, and never quite gained mainstream acceptance. It was not merely the depiction of a black Jesus that was controversial, but the way it challenged societal norms and questioned the sanitized religious narratives perpetuated by Hollywood. Despite its critical commentary on race and religion, Black Jesus struggled to receive the recognition it deserved, reflecting the barriers that Black creators face when attempting to reclaim religious and historical narratives. Here, another serious trend is noticed. Whenever Jesus is portrayed as Black in movies, this is done with a subtle sense that this has been allowed as humor. This trend is not accidental. It's a calculated move that reinforces the long-standing notion that the real image of Jesus is, and should always be, white. When a Black Jesus is depicted in media, it's frequently done in a comedic or satirical context, which suggests that this portrayal is not meant to be taken seriously. By using humor to depict a Black Jesus, Hollywood achieves two things. On the surface, it gives the appearance of diversity, creating room for alternative portrayals. However, by framing it as satire, it implicitly signals that while it might be amusing or novel to imagine Jesus as Black, the true serious image of Jesus remains white. This subtle framing suggests that a Black Jesus is merely an imaginative deviation rather than a historically convincing portrayal. Allowing Black depictions of Jesus only in comedic or irreverent formats is a way of subtly reinforcing the dominant narrative that the real, revered Jesus is white. It implies, "We'll let you play around with the idea of a Black Jesus, but only as a joke." This approach serves to preserve the traditional white image of Christ, suggesting that a Black Jesus is an artistic improvisation rather than a legitimate representation. The way Jesus is depicted matters deeply, especially for Black worshippers who have historically been marginalized by the very religion they were introduced to through colonization and slavery. Constantly presenting a Black Jesus in a humorous or exaggerated context alienates Black believers from fully connecting with their faith. This comedic framing sends an implicit message. Their vision of divinity is not to be taken seriously, subtly reinforcing feelings of spiritual inferiority. What do you think? Was Jesus Black or white? If his ethnicity does not matter, why have white Europeans tried so hard to establish that he was white? In the comment section right below, share your thoughts on what your logic and mind say about Jesus's complexion. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We bring videos on Black Africa, its history, rich arts and culture, and things the world should know about. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.